became presidential. Trump dedicated part of his speech to honoring fallen Navy SEAL Ryan Owens. He was killed during a recent military raid in Yemen, and his wife Karen, seated next to first daughter Ivanka Trump, overcome with emotion.
Ryan was a part of a highly successful raid that generated large amounts of vital intelligence that will lead to many more victories in the future against our enemy. Ryan's legacy is etched into eternity. Thank you. And Ryan is looking down right now, you know that, and he's very happy because I think he just broke a record. Ryan laid down his life for his friends, for his country, and for our freedom, and we will never forget Ryan.
And Van Jones joining me now, also with me, CNN political commentator Angela Rye. So Van, you said this quote, that was one of the most extraordinary moments you've ever seen in American politics. Why?
Well, because of the ability for the emotionality to connect with the political agenda of Donald Trump. Usually the emotions that he's playing on are very, very dark, very fear-based. What I think that liberals have to take away from it is that the virus is mutating. He is developing new weaponry that I don't think that liberals expected him to be able to develop so quickly. Most of his speeches are terrible. You have Twitter Trump, which is terrible, and then you have teleprompter Trump, which is barely any better. This was an effective speech. He was able to do things you haven't seen him do before. His agenda is still just as awful. The speech was full of lies and the same kind of stuff he always does, but he now has a set of weapons you've not seen him use before. If he starts doing this kind of thing instead of those crazy rallies over and over again, you begin to create problems for Democrats that I don't think they're ready for.
Do you agree, Angela, with Van, that this was presidential?
I definitely don't think that this is presidential, and it could be that I just don't understand the standard that we're using. But if by presidential we're talking about becoming a leader on the world stage, one that Americans everywhere could be hopeful about and supportive of, then I think the answer is a resounding no. Donald Trump took 61 minutes to tell 51 lies, and they aren't just lies about his record that promised jobs and hope.
What about that specific moment that we're talking about?
Sure, I think that just demonstrates his ability to be a decent human being. But I don't think that overall his speech, this joint address to Congress, demonstrates his ability, nor was it presidential. So again, I think that we have to go back to the fact that he talked about creating jobs that he did not create. He talks about this wonderful record he has so far while he's been in office that pales in comparison to my president, Barack Obama. So I think, again, when we talk about the standard of being presidential, he's not met that standard. And I'm not willing to give him a pass because the bar is low.
Van?
Well, listen, I appreciate the passion. Part of the thing is that President Obama set a standard, as far as I'm concerned, that's not likely to be met soon.
That's fair.
I don't think that. So I don't think President Obama is a standard. We've had some great presidents, and we've had some awful presidents, and then we've had President Trump. And the problem that you have with President Trump is President Trump has not even touched, until now, hasn't even touched the shoe of the worst of them. And suddenly, though, I think Democrats have expected that he's going to stay that bad. So much of what the liberals have made an issue of isn't just his agenda. but it's his temperament and his tone and his team. He now seems to have developed a team that, since that awful inaugural address, that carnage address, has now been able to come up with a different playbook for public addresses. Everybody got mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to tell you, watch the bounce he gets out of that speech, and watch how he starts to use a different playbook. Liberals are going to have to, we're going to have to reset. He is not always going to just hand us opportunities to go after him. If he starts to improve his performance like that, liberals are going to have to reset how we deal with this guy.
So Van, and I hear, go ahead, Brianna.
Go on, Angela. I guess, is it undeniable, as Van is saying, that this was just a better Trump, and that is a challenge to Democrats?
No, I think it was a different Trump, and he's demonstrated his ability to read off of a teleprompter before. I think that Van is right that we shouldn't expect that he's going to be as predictable as maybe we once thought he was. Shame on us if any of us thought he was anything but predictable. But I think the reality of it is the same day that he delivered this address is the same day he signed an executive order that makes our waterways far more treacherous, and Flint is still an issue. The same day that he delivers this address, Jeff Sessions is talking about dialing back on lawsuits against police departments that have harmed black and brown bodies. This is within a week of them saying they are going to federally come after folks who utilize recreational marijuana in states where it's legal. This is the same Donald Trump, and regardless of if he's screaming or he's trolling media on Twitter, this is the same one. So we have to recognize the tone, but recognize it's not the message, it's the policy. And that is what we have to continue to fight against. And we have to be woke. We can't be distracted by the tone at all.
Okay, let me say a couple things here. It's liberals that have made an issue of two things, both his policies, which are terrible, and his tone, which is often terrible. What you see now is he's showing he can address the tone question. So it's liberals who, so now all I'm saying is, listen, you now have potentially a prettier rapper on the same poison. And so you can't say, as liberals have been saying, his tone is terrible, his temperament is terrible, and then when it changes, say, well, that doesn't matter. All I'm trying to point out to liberals is, if we thought we were going to get a twofer, terrible policy and terrible delivery, we may be in a different environment. So what does that mean? First of all, it means I think liberals have not internalized some realities here. He is collapsing with liberals. It's true. Liberals have, from 20% down to 12%. But he is actually holding strong with Republicans, 90+%, and independents are moving his way even before this speech. So the liberal momentum that we have, that we're so proud of, with the rallies, with the town halls, with the airports, is not yet translating to a breakup of his support even with independents. And that was before this speech. And so all I'm saying is, listen, when I say he's presidential, that's frankly a bare standard. I'm not saying he's George Washington or Barack Obama, but I'm saying he did crack now that bare standard, and we are going to have to take him more seriously. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm not doubting, the fact that we need to take him more seriously. I think that we also need to be aware that he's just as dangerous regardless of how he speaks, regardless of how calm he sounds. Agreed, Van. So I agree with you on that point, and I wonder, what is our obligation then to tell the truth about what he's saying? The fact that it's exactly the same, it does not matter what the tone is. I've not been a tone person. I've been all about what he says and the impact of what he says. So him and this Muslim ban that he says is not a Muslim ban, that he tells the courts, I'm going to see you in court, they're going to maybe take out Iraq, and it's still just as treacherous. So we just have to still acknowledge the dangerous nature of the words that he speaks and the policies that they hope to push forth.
Hey, listen, you and I are in complete agreement, and I think that part of the thing is we are pretending that the standard of, when I say this guy has not met the standard of a president, we have had some awful presidents, and he couldn't even catch them. He has now caught them. He can at least do the things that presidents are supposed to do. He can stand up and give a speech that's effective. He can pull on some of Reagan's tricks to use American stories to advance his agenda. He hasn't done any of that stuff before. All I'm saying is, if you are playing a team, and you are used to just saying all he can do is drive to the basket. All we got to do is stop him from driving to the basket. We can stop him. And then they start raining some threes down on you. You've got, okay, hold on a second. That's some new stuff. He showed some new stuff yesterday. And so what my big hope is going forward is that we have to get very surgical as liberals. First of all, I think that so much of you're different, but so many people come on and what they talk about is proper protocol and politeness. That this guy does not follow proper protocols and he's not polite. They don't get to the substantive issues, and then guess what? He might change on that. Now you're going to have to deal with, and you've been there, but others have not, with the actual substantive impact. What we're not talking about is the fact that, frankly, the prices of groceries are about to go through the roof if you chase off all the immigrant labor. There's a lot of practical issues that we don't talk about because we're so busy policing his tone, and last night he didn't even let us do that.
And Van, I guess the thing that I would say back to you as my brother and my friend is that you are brilliant and you have the ability to translate the dangerous nature of the impacts of his policy agenda. And I would just continue to urge you to do that. Like, it is so important for us to have these conversations, to talk to folks who are Trump supporters who we were tuning out. And I'm owning that, tuning out and blocking out and thinking it was just ignorance. And he won, to your point, from during the election. So what do we do to have these conversations to say, listen, Trump supporter A or B, this is just as dangerous for you. This is going to impact you just as much as it does someone in the inner city, just as much as it does in rural Appalachia. This is a problem for all of us. This isn't about a partisan divide. This is just the difference between wrong and right. He sounded like a decent human being yesterday, but those policies are still not decent human policies. I think we have to emphasize that.
Angela, look, why were liberals so upset by what Van said? By acknowledging that this was more presidential?
Because I don't think, Brianna, that a lot of people thought it was more presidential. I think the tone is one piece of this, and Van talked about that. There are a lot of folks who just said, he's mean old Donald Trump. But there are many more of us who are saying, no, you have to look at their record. Look at what he did just yesterday. This is dangerous. This is troubling. This is literally causing people to live in fear. We have to acknowledge that. It's not about him sounding presidential. It's about him being presidential and pushing forth policy that protects people on our soil and beyond. That is a reality.
Let me just make a. It might be a minor point. It might be a major point. Mm-hmm. Being presidential, you could be presidential and have terrible policies. Nixon behaved before he got in trouble the first term. Yeah, he fulfilled the basic functions of being a president. He just had terrible policies. I disagree with Reagan's policies. Donald Trump has terrible policies, and he has behaved in a way that is completely unpresidential, including most of his speeches, including his inaugural address, which was basically just an amped-up rally speech. So when I say that he is now behaving in a more presidential way, I'm not making a judgment about his policies. His policies are awful. But I just think at some point, when somebody gets beat up on, rightfully so, behaving in a bizarre, childish, crazy, petulant way, and then they change their behavior, you've got to acknowledge that. You can't just say, well, it doesn't matter how he gives a speech. We have said, you haven't, but we have said consistently, the substance of the speech is terrible and the way he's doing it is terrible. He has now made an adjustment. I don't understand why pointing out that he took a card away from his critics last night is doing disservice to the liberal cause.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've said that it was doing a disservice to a liberal cause. I think that my point is we've seen him make a pivot before, and that thing didn't even last 24 hours. So I think from that standpoint, too, I was surprised that you said it. Like, let's give this dude, let's see what he says on Twitter today, right? Like, is this really going to happen? We don't really even know. He can't be disciplined enough to withstand the pivot.
Is it, Van, just a final thought to you, is it denial on the part of Democrats to not acknowledge that that's really an issue for him changing the tone? Because the polls that we saw of even moderate Republicans who were thinking they might not be able to get behind Donald Trump was to this very issue, that they didn't feel it was about tone. It wasn't necessarily about his policies.
Yeah, I think that the virus has mutated. I think that he just got a taste of something. Probably people have been telling him, if you would tone this down a little bit, you might get a little bit of traction here. And he probably, like Angela said, couldn't do it, didn't want to do it, blah, 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 blah. I'm not 100% sure, but my bet is he starts doing what you just saw over and over. I see him going into media markets. I see him doing stuff and actually hoping that liberals continue to miss the fact that he's growing in office. I I hate to say this. It doesn't make me happy to say this. I would wish I could say I didn't see what I saw. But I saw a person with the worst ideas in the world getting better at delivering the message. And that is very worrisome.
All right, Van Jones, Angela Rye, thank you so much.